This is Scotty Reed with a Black Talk Radio News Report, and I want to answer a question that was posed to me by a subscriber to Black Talk Radio News. So I'm being asked this question: Scotty T, what is your commentary on the issue of MJ? And they're talking about cannabis as explained in this video compilation. So I go to the Facebook video, and it's just another video from a member of the Nation of Islam piggybacking off of some research, alleged research done by Wesley Muhammad, also of the Nation of Islam. So I'm not going to play the video. It's like a 14-minute video, but I will read the description and talk about some of the sources that they listed. And listen, The Miseducation of the Negro, that's a book by Carter G. Woodson, not just pertaining to black people, but the things brought up in that book about the state of education in the United States is still relevant today. I was just reading about it today, of just how, you know, people just don't know how to research. They don't know how to critically think, and therefore they fall susceptible to believing stuff that may not be true. And a lot of people also, it takes time to research stuff. All right. It does take time to research stuff, to check multiple sources. And a lot of people, they don't have time for that, or they won't make time for research. And they will just take something from somebody who has a cult of personality, and they'll just run with it without doing the actual research themselves. So let me go ahead and read the description of the video. It says, breaking news, marijuana. And by the way, marijuana is a racist term that was created in the I believe it was the 1920s and the 1930s, when the U.S. government wanted to use racism to justify the drug war or the war against cannabis. And they were targeting Mexicans at the time. Mexicans smoking weed. And go look up the old film called, what is that film called? It's called, I can't think of it right now. I'll think of it in a minute. But it is, it's a video propaganda that was put out there by the United States government demonizing reefer madness. That's the name of it. Came out in the 1930s, I believe. And it was like, oh, if you smoke marijuana, these people are becoming homicidal and crazy, and they're killing people. And all of this is propaganda to justify the United States government trampling on the free will of individuals who are using natural substances, whether it is for recreation or whether it's for medicinal purposes. The U.S. government wants to control all aspects of your life, just about. So this is what it says. Breaking news, marijuana. Peace, family. For anyone who smokes marijuana, we may not agree on everything, but we shouldn't be afraid to take a look and see if something is true or false either. Let's dialogue. Well, okay, first let me address the fact that he's setting people up, that if they agree, if they disagree with their assessment of the U.S. government being involved in a conspiracy to homosexualize the black community through GMO marijuana, or cannabis, as I like to use the scientific term and not the racist term marijuana, that if you disagree with them, then you must smoke weed. That's why you disagreeing, because you smoke weed. You have to pay attention to language and read in between the lines. So again, I'm gonna read this again. For anyone who smokes MJ, I'll just say MJ, we may not agree on everything, but we shouldn't be afraid to take a look and see if something is true or false either. All right, so, you know, why even put that in your question? Why not just say, hey, we may not agree on everything, but let's take a look at this and let's dialogue. Not anyone who smokes marijuana, which is saying in coded language that if you disagree with me, it's because you smoke MJ or you smoke cannabis. Let me continue. Thought, though it is a natural plant and has been for thousands of years, it is being genetically modified and used as a weapon by the U.S. government under the code name EA2233, Experimental Agent 2233. All right, that's one of the sources I looked that up. They provide no proof whatsoever. They are taking a look at a experiment that the United States military ran 50 or 60 years ago and trying to say that, oh, this has been implemented. But they provide no evidence, no proof, no journalistic proof. Just like Gary Webb, who exposed the CIA crack cocaine conspiracy to flood America with cheap cocaine so that they could fund their dirty wars. Gary Webb did a lot of research. He found sources and he was able to document this conspiracy. They provide no such source. They provide no such documentation. All right. Now it goes on to say, does the GMO MJ have a connection with the rise in homosexuality within the inner city communities? Let me address that right there, because there's a question that came up in my mind. What proof do you have that there is a rise in homosexuality in the black community? Now, we're dealing with religious people here. This is the Nation of Islam. We know what their religious beliefs are. And again, beliefs do not equal facts. But I'm not going to attack their religion, but it is important to bring that into context. Okay, so what proof do you have that homosexuality is on the rise in inner city? For example, the U.S. government, I think it was the CDC, just said that teen pregnancy in the United States is at the lowest rate ever since they've been tracking these sort of stats. All right, that from the ages of, I think it was 13, might have been 15, but from the ages of, let's just go with 15 to 19, that these young girls and women are not having babies anymore like they were in the past. That has declined by 69%. And I mentioned it the other day in a social media post, and I said, okay, now some of these people are saying we have an infertility crisis. But for all these years, people have been working to reduce teen pregnancy, and now you get it to the lowest rate ever. Now people talking about, oh, the human race gonna go extinct because these young women are not having babies anymore. But how did they gather that data to make such a statement that teen pregnancy is on the decline in the United States? Well, they pulled the birth certificates that were on file, and they were able to track 99.9%, I believe is what the figure was, might have been 99.8% of births in the United States during the period that they were looking at. So they had actual data and documentation to back up their assertion that teen pregnancy is on the decline at its lowest point ever since they've been tracking these stats in U.S. history. Now, somebody point me to a study or a survey where, like, for example, the U.S. Census, which comes out every 10 years, and they ask you certain questions on these census. So I don't recall ever seeing a question asking your sexual orientation or status or whatever you want to call yourself in terms of your sexuality on the United States Census. They ask you if you are male or if you are a female. All right. All these other gender terms, or look, there's only three classifications for sex. There's male, there's female, and there's hermaphrodites. I might be saying that wrong. Hermaphrodites, which is people who have an extra chromosome and they have both male genitalia and female genitalia. All right, people are born with both sexes. So there's only 3 sex classifications. All this other gender stuff, I don't even care to get into that. But where is your documentation? Point me to a study, cite some kind of survey. Did you conduct your own survey? Did you go into the community for the past 10 years surveying people, asking them if they were homosexual or not? All right. So there's no documentation for that. They mentioned no documentation for that. So we're supposed to just take people's word that homosexuality is on the rise. Or is it that you're seeing more homosexuals in media, on television? People are posting this stuff on social media and what have you. All right. So you're perceiving something to be on the rise that may not be on the rise. You're just seeing people being more open about their sexuality, or the media is just putting more shows on television with a homosexual theme. Now, homosexuality can also be a learned behavior. Okay, it could be people experimenting, you know, just engaged in experimentation. Oh, I want to see what it's like to be with another woman, or I want to see what it's like to be with another man. Or perhaps you have a group of parents who indulge the delusions of a young child who may be biologically male but likes to play with dolls and stuff like that, and they start dressing them like females and what have you. That can be learned behavior. All right, that can be engineered behavior that has nothing to do with chemicals. It could be social programming through media or through behavior. All right, so I've seen no proof of this. So see, off the bat, I'm already questioning your research capabilities and your credibility on that issue. Could be you just a homophobe or what have you. You don't like homosexuality. You see it as a threat. And so every time you turn around, you see a homosexual hide behind a tree or something like that. I don't mean to sound facetious or anything like that. I'm just saying, where is the studies? Where's the documentation that you can show me that homosexuality is on the rise in the inner city? And why, you know, is it on the rise anywhere else? All right. So it also says, why is George Soros investing so much money in it? Well, it's the #1 substance that people use in the United States. They use cannabis more than anything else, more than alcohol, more than cocaine, more than heroin. That's why he investing money in it. He's reading the political tea leaves that people are no longer buying into Richard Nixon's drug war, which he started to target black people with. All right, Michelle Alexander talked about this in her book, The New Jim Crow, and what the former chief of staff of Richard Nixon said about the drug war, how they completely fabricated talking points to make you think that, oh, heroin was on the rise and you know, all these people ODing from heroin when it wasn't true. Now, it's kind of true today based on, you know, the statistical data of all these overdoses, but back then, Richard Nixon was lying. And then also, they figured, oh, these people smoking cannabis, it's making them be against the Vietnam War. Let's target these hippies and their, you know, cannabis smoking selves and throw them into prison and what have you. Okay? So George Soros perhaps is, why don't you ask George Soros? And I have seen no evidence that he is invested in that. But I'll take your word for it on that, because that isn't so crazy. George Soros is about making money through investments. So, and perhaps since that is a big money maker in many of these states that have legalized it. That explains why he's invested in it. Okay, now, why are they really making it legal? Well, because since the drug war started in the 1970s, there has been a movement to decriminalize, or to get the government out of people's lives and stop throwing them into prison slavery because they choose as adults to use a substance, okay, that so-called moral people up on their high horse would never use. All right, so they want to demonize other people and say, oh, they must be immoral, that's why they drink, or they're immoral, that's why they smoke. And that morality has nothing to do with it. Okay, cultures have used cannabis for thousands of years, as he's pointed out. The Rastafarians use it as a religious sacrament. Okay, so it says, let me see, do they care that much about the people to where they will make it legal and cure all the diseases which they make trillions of dollars from through the selling of medication? Well, actually, if you're paying attention to politics, you will know the pharmaceutical companies, the ones who are responsible for this opioid crisis that we hear reported about in the news, have always sought to criminalize cannabis because it's a pain reliever. They don't want you using something natural. They rather you take aspirin or Bayer or Tylenol or something. It threatens their industry. Okay, so they lobby the U.S. government to keep these things illegal. Just like back in the 1930s when it was the Hearst Company. Y'all remember Patricia Hearst? And, you know, she was kidnapped, where her father owned most of the newspapers in this country. What are newspapers made from? They're made from trees, right? That's how paper is made, from trees. Guess what else you can make paper from? Cannabis and hemp. And hemp is the cousin of cannabis that doesn't have THC in it. Okay? So he lobbied the U.S. government to outlaw cannabis in all its forms because he saw it as a threat to his monopoly on paper, because he owned a whole bunch of property where they grew trees specifically to make paper. All right, so these pharmaceutical companies don't want you to have access to this natural remedy, which scientific studies have shown it can prevent different types of cancer. It can treat epilepsy. I mean, it just goes on and on. You got an NFL player right now who is funding a study because based off of an earlier Harvard study that showed that people who were in car crashes and suffered traumatic brain injuries, that if they were cannabis users, they were most likely to recover from those injuries and would not suffer the long-term damage as non-cannabis users. All right, look it up. Don't believe me. So this NFL player saying it's stupid for the NFL, who drugs us with all of these different drugs from the pharmaceutical companies so we don't feel no pain and we can get out there and play when we're hurt and all this and that, to help us deal with inflammation and things. And that's something cannabis treats. And then you want to talk about traumatic brain injuries and concussions in the NFL when this study shows that cannabis use protects people from traumatic brain injuries. All right, so I don't know where they're talking. I don't know what they're talking about. It makes absolutely no sense. So it says, why would they intentionally lose money? What is really going on? Well, the people who are in the cannabis industry aren't losing any money. Okay, And if you're talking about the United States government, the federal government isn't in the cannabis business. Have you not been paying attention? Barack Obama just simply said that, oh, in these states where they have legalized it, we're going to respect the will of the voters, and I'm going to stop sending the DEA in there to bust these companies and these cannabis dispensaries. All right. So, but he refused. He refused to remove it from the DEA's list of scheduled drugs, even though he was well aware of the science. He said himself that alcohol is far more dangerous than cannabis. All right. And he's also admitted to heavy cannabis use in his youth. But that certainly, and because I've heard people say, oh, cannabis use makes you dumb. Well, it certainly didn't hinder him from going to Harvard. It didn't hinder him from becoming president. And a lot of people say he's smart and what have you. I will also point out that many of the founders of tech companies have admitted to using cannabis and able to make breakthroughs while on cannabis, scientific breakthroughs and engineering breakthroughs, because they say it helps them imagine things. It helps them to get deeper into meditation, which is why perhaps the Rastafarians use it to help them meditate. So when people be saying they, you have to ask who they talking about. All right. You know, who is they? The pharmaceutical companies certainly spend millions of dollars to lobby the U.S. government to keep these things illegal. The U.S. government also does not provide health care other than through Medicaid and Medicare. And that's your taxes. That's your taxes. So actually, the government would save money, taxpayers would save money if people were able to use a natural plant instead of these pharmaceutical drugs. But the government, outside of the Veterans Administration, which there is a push to allow them to prescribe cannabis because it helps people with their post-traumatic stress disorders when they coming out of these war zones. Other than that, the U.S. government doesn't provide health care. So how would they lose trillions of dollars? They're not selling health care. I go to the VA for free. I don't have to pay anything. Okay? So again, they're not providing any kind of credible research, documentation, and they're asking questions that if you ask yourself the right questions and you examine it deeper, you'll find out that these people don't know what they're talking about. What they say is going on, they don't have any proof that it's going on. U.S. government does not make millions of dollars from people being sick. That would be the pharmaceutical companies, the very ones who don't want cannabis to be made legal. So he features Dr. Wesley Muhammad in this montage video. He also uses Alex Jones. Now, I've said this before. Alex Jones is a racist. Okay? And I'm glad I don't see KRS-One on there no more. I'm glad I don't see Professor Griff partnering with this racist. He runs Prison Planet and InfoWars, and he's known for being a conspiracy theorist. Matter of fact, just last week they put out an article about a colony on Mars where they're sending children to molest. This is InfoWars. This is Alex Jones, and you're citing him as a credible source. And he just admitted, okay, or his attorneys admitted in court that where his wife is divorcing him and he's in a custody battle and she's talking about his conspiracy theories and saying he ain't stable and therefore he shouldn't get custody of the children, his attorneys countered that by saying he's just an actor. Okay? He's just an actor. And I believe it's true. I peeped Alex Jones' game back in 1999. I didn't peep his game back then. I did find useful information, which everybody has useful information. Doesn't mean it's always going to be correct. But I was actually a paying subscriber back in 1999 to prisonplanet.org. I was paying something like $50 a year to subscribe, because he does provide valuable information from other people, and he can give you some insights. But guess what? In order to sell you a big lie, they got to at first establish credibility with you with some truths. So Alex Jones is an actor who's making a lot of money pushing conspiracy theories. And I like to deal with conspiracy facts, all right, where you can document a conspiracy going back to like Gary Webb, where he showed the CIA with Oliver North was working with these drug cartels to flood the community with crack cocaine so that they could fund their off-the-book dirty wars. So Alex Jones as a source? Really? Come on now. All right, so they also say go ahead and reach Atrazine. Now, I first became aware of the pesticide called Atrazine years ago when I interviewed Dr. Tyrone Hayes on the Black Talk Radio Network. Atrazine is a chemical that is found in pesticides like Roundup. So I forget the name of the company, Syngin or something like that, Syngin or something. But Mr. Hayes was funded by them to do research on their chemical to find out if it has any kind of adverse effects on the environment. Well, Dr. Hayes' research on this pesticide, this chemical Atrazine, showed that over time it was causing frogs to change sex. That, you know, that they would change from male to female in amphibians. Now, not going to have the same dramatic effect on a human being whose body is much more complex, but it can cause feminine traits. All right, this is documented by a scientist. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is actually research that Dr. Hayes did, and then they tried to kill the man and tried to discredit the man. Didn't want him to go public with his findings, but he did anyway. And so, you know, they started harassing him, trying to kill him and all of that. All right, so why are we assuming that everybody's using Roundup or Atrazine as a weed killer when it would kill weed? You know what I'm saying? That makes no sense. Why would you use a weed killer on weed, on your plants? You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, it maybe don't kill all plants, and they, you know, made it so that it targets specific types of plants, but everybody don't use Roundup on the stuff they growing in their garden. Now, he mentions paraquat. Let me pull up what paraquat is. This is his second source he asked us to look up. Paraquat, I'm not even going to try to use this chemical, try to say the name of the chemical by, I'm not even going to try it. All right, but it is an organic compound with the chemical formula. They give the formula. It is classified as a phylogeny, not sure what that is, a family of redox active heterocycles of similar structure. Paraquat was manufactured by Chevron. This salt, so it's a salt, is one of the most widely used herbicides. So again, we're talking about stuff that's used to kill parasites and pests from eating up crops and stuff. It is a quick-acting and non-selective killing green plant tissue on contact. Now, again, how are you going to use this on cannabis if it kills green plant tissue on contact? It also says it is also toxic to human beings and animals. It is also linked to the development of Parkinson's disease. Now, again, let me just back up for a minute. These companies don't care about the adverse effects on the environment. Again, going back to Dr. Hayes, when he came up with, when he did the research that they paid him to do, and he came up with findings that would not be favorable, they didn't want the research released. They tried to keep. So I'm not saying that these companies are not poisoning the environment, or they wouldn't use it. Okay? But again, I've seen no proof that companies who are growing cannabis in the states that have legalized it are using any of these chemicals. All right? Also, they use the same chemicals on the food that you eat. So why are you singling out cannabis if it's in the food supply? And cannabis is a food. It is also a food source. All right, a lot of people don't know that, but it is a food source as well. So you know, they're just making a whole lot of assumptions. They're not providing you with documentation that, you know, these companies who are licensed, and a lot of these are small companies, small corporations. And what I've seen some documentaries and show these grow operations, and a lot of them want the best product. And we know that the best product is what they call organic. Organic. So it's one thing to make these wild accusations without any documentation, but it's quite another to just warn people and say, you might want to check in with the company where you're purchasing your cannabis from and making sure they're using a chemical-free, herbicide-free, atrazine-free, organic. They're growing this stuff organically. All right, that's what you should be warning them about. Not coming up with crazy, undocumented. I am not going to say it's crazy. I'm not going to say it's crazy. Coming up with undocumented stuff. This is no proof. Me just looking up what this chemical does, this is no proof that this is being used on cannabis by any of these cannabis companies or any of these grow operations. It's not proof, people. It's just a chemical that has an adverse effect, and it kills green plant tissue on contact. Why would anybody use that on their plants? But again, I must stress that the food supply in the United States is tainted. So why are you just focusing on cannabis? What about tomatoes? What about cucumbers? What about melons? What corn? Why are you focusing in on cannabis? Okay? And I've had a situation in the past years ago when they were when it was being put on the ballot to legalize cannabis. I came across another religious person who was out there speaking against the legalization. They didn't care that this is used to target people and put them into slavery. They approaching it from, oh, it's immoral. It's immoral to use this, even though in the Bible it has talked about using cannabis. All right, this is something, if you believe in the Creator, something the Creator made. And the Creator, you know, we could use the Bible, said, don't call anything that God has made bad. Okay? So, again, this is no proof. All right, then they go to, let me pull up this other, this is synthetic THC. It's not THC. THC is the active component in cannabis. It's the active component that research has shown protects your brain against traumatic brain injuries. It also helps prevent certain types of cancer. It also treats epileptic seizures, and that's why you have these cannabinoid oils, extracts, and what have you that they giving to children. The scientific research has been done. See, there's research, actual scientific research done in a scientific environment that shows the medicinal benefits of cannabis, but these people that's telling you it's making you gay, they not presenting you with any kind of comprehensive study showing this. They talking about atrazine. Well, that's tied to Roundup chemicals. That's the work of Dr. Hayes. If you're in the state that, where they legalize it, you can grow your own. Don't use Roundup as a weed killer. That's how you solve that problem. This other chemical, don't use it either. This salt made by Chevron as a herbicide, it kills green plant tissue. So, of course, you're not going to use that. I don't even know if it's widely available to the general public. Now, here's another one. I'm not going to try to pronounce this name, but it says it is a synthetic analog of THC, which was invented. See, they invented this in 1949 during attempts to elucidate the structure of THC, one of the active components of cannabis. DM, this is the initials of this invention of the, I think it was the military. DMHP is a pale yellow viscous oil which is insoluble in water but dissolves in alcohol or nonpolar solvents. Okay, so it is similar in structure to THC, differing only in a position of one double bond in a replacement of the 3-pentyl chain with another chain. I'm not going to get into all the scientific names they're using. It produces similar activity to THC, such as a sedative effect. Instead of maybe that's what Michael Jackson should have used to help him sleep, was to smoke cannabis instead of using whatever that pharmaceutical drug they use to put people to sleep. Maybe he should have used that to help himself go to sleep, and maybe he'll still be alive. But also, it says, but it is considerably more potent than THC. Okay, especially having much stronger analgesic and anticonvulsant effects. So that means that it was a more effective painkiller. And remember I mentioned about THC or cannabis treating epilepsy, where people have convulsions and stuff, and how the science has shown that cannabis eliminates that. Well, this had a similar effect. All right. Now it says, although comparatively weaker psychological effects. Now, I don't know what kind of psychological effects, any studies credible studies. This, again, I hear this propaganda all the time. Again, going back to Reefer Madness, that film that was made in the 30s, where it was showing people smoking weed and getting these crazy look on their face and just going crazy and turning into murderers, or making the women loose and having sex with jazz players and all that. This is racism, okay? So anyway, it said it is thought to act as a CB agonist in a similar manner to other cannabinoid derivatives. So then they started investigating it as a non-lethal incapacitating agent. So the U.S. military's chemical weapons program in the Edgewood Arsenal experiment looked at this. This, again, is a chemical that they invented. This isn't THC. This is a synthetic THC. It's not even cannabis. It's not even cannabis, okay? So if you're worried about this, then it wouldn't be in cannabis. Somebody would slip it to you, all right? Put it in your drink or something, okay? Like they do these date rape drugs and whatnot. But it also went on to talk about in this experiment that once they gave a person up to 1 to 2 milligrams, all volunteers were considered to be incapable of performing military duties, with the effects lasting as long as 2 to 3 days. Now, nobody's going to take this willingly, and I've not heard any reports of this happening to people that's buying cannabis in the states, in the states that have legalized this. So all you've done is point us to a couple of chemicals. You pointed us to this synthetic THC. You pointed us to a study by the U.S. Military Chemical Weapon Department. And when was this again? Back in, let me see, it doesn't say the date. Let me pull up the Edgewood Arsenal experiment, see if I can get into the, from 1948 to 1975, the U.S. Army Chemical Corps conducted classified human subject research at the Edgewood Arsenal facility in Maryland. The purpose was to evaluate the impact of low-dose chemical warfare agents on military personnel and to test protective clothing, pharmaceuticals as well, and vaccines. Why y'all singling out cannabis? Now, again, where's your proof? Where's your documentation? Where are your sources to show that the U.S. government is working with any of these private companies who have cannabis grow operations? And again, in these states that have legalized it, you can grow your own. All right, you can grow your own. They may limit the number of plants that you can grow. So that's how you solve that problem right there, is to grow your own. So again, I don't deal with, I mean, I look at theories, then I do the research, I ask questions, and then I try to find the answers to those questions. I just don't accept stuff on faith. That's what religious people do. They accept stuff on faith. And I'm a spiritual person. And I do believe in positive speaking. But when we're talking about researching stuff, when we're talking about things of this nature, no, I just don't take people's word for nothing. I have to do the research. I have to demand proof. And I'm seeing no proof. I'm just seeing you pointing me to some chemicals. You pointing me to an experiment that was over in 1975, but I've seen no link, no government informants coming out, no whistleblowers coming out and saying, hey, the U.S. government is using these chemicals and partnering up with corporations to homosexualize the population. Now, let me ask you this. Now, most of these people are talking about gay men. They say the inner city. They're focusing on gay black men. All right. Now, if this was true, would it cure gay women of homosexuality? In other words, would lesbians all of a sudden become heterosexuals? Is that happening in the community? Are we seeing a decline in lesbians in the black community? All right, because you know, they talk about it makes you effeminate and all this and that. Though I saw that in Dr. Wesley video. Would it not make these butch females more effeminate? Would it not cure them of lesbianism? That's a question I got to ask. But again, I'm not saying that lesbianism is on the rise or on the decline in the black community, because there's no basis for me to make that statement when I have seen no research documenting such a thing. People, we need to engage in critical thinking. I know this isn't taught in schools today, not even in college unless you're taking certain disciplines or whatnot. But in terms of K through 12, they're not teaching these kids to be critical thinkers. They're not teaching these children how to do proper research. Okay, so why are you accepting stuff on face value without doing your own research and asking critical questions? If they can't provide an answer to these questions, then you need to dismiss what they're saying. Okay? Don't get it twisted. This doesn't mean Scotty Reed's a pothead or anything like that because he's disagreeing with what they're saying. I'm saying it's not even a matter of me disagreeing. It's a matter of me saying you've shown me no proof. You're pointing me to Alex Jones, a known conspiracy theorist whose attorneys in court just argued he's just an actor. He's also a documented racist, so why are you going to this man, you know, thinking that he's credible or something like to that effect? All right. So again, you know, Atrazine, yes. Atrazine has shown to have a feminizing effect in frogs. And other studies in Europe have suggested that it can have an feminizing effect on human beings. And so knowing that, don't use Roundup. Not only if you're growing your own cannabis, if you got a garden and you growing squash, corn, tomatoes, chickpeas, whatever you growing, it's best that you don't use Roundup. Now, one last thing I want to address in terms of GMOs. Again, you have to worry about GMOs in everything. And why are they coming up with genetically modified cannabis? Well, all you need to know is their history and what these companies have said. That, see, they're getting patents because they are coming up with a new, quote unquote, new strain that these vegetables or this cannabis has certain properties that are unique to the seeds that we have produced, and therefore we got a patent on that. And if you want to grow it, then you got to buy our seeds. Okay? And if a farmer, let's say your organic farm is close to a farm where it's GMO seeds being used, and then it comes harvest time, those GMO crops can contaminate your organic crops. And then and this has been documented, then they'll come in talking about, this is our property. You're using our intellectual property. Instead of them being sued for contaminating your farm with GMOs. So again, a lot of people have agendas. They have religious agendas, and then other people are getting paid by the pharmaceutical companies and these so-called pro-drug war organizations to come up with this type of stuff. I'm not saying that that's the case with the Nation of Islam. I don't know if they gotten any grants or anything to come out with this. I don't know that. It could be just a religious thing for them, all right? I don't know, okay? But all I'm saying is, show me some scientific evidence. Don't point me to atrazine when that can affect all plant life in the environment. It can hurt the environment. Don't point me to this other chemical that Chevron make, which is some kind of salt that's used as a herbicide that kills green plants on contact. Why would they use that? They don't make sense. But again, I'm not seeing any kind of scientific evidence. I'm seeing innuendos. I'm seeing allegations. I'm seeing accusations. I'm not getting any sources. There are no whistleblowers being named. I think Wesley Muhammad told him something about he knows somebody that worked as a shelf stocker in a grocery store, and they told him so and so. Man, really? Really? All right, so those are my thoughts on this whole issue of whether or not they trying to homosexualize the black community through GMO cannabis. I've seen no proof. And the U.S. government is not even involved in this. They're not even involved in it. Matter of fact, I expect Jeff Sessions to start busting these places. You can't, you know, and again, yeah, the U.S. government is involved in drug smuggling when it caused the same deal they had with the drug cartels back in the 90s. they have with the cartel, the Sinaloa cartel. This is documented. Mexico's largest paper did an investigative series on it, and it was shown even in Chicago courtroom that the DEA had a deal with the Sinaloa drug cartel, allow them to smuggle dope into the United States and distribute it as long as they gave them information on their rivals. So they could pretend like, oh, we're really out here fighting the drug war when they're not. Because if there were no drugs on the street, then nobody would have access to these drugs, and then they wouldn't have any slaves to work for them on a prison plantation. Anyway, this has been Scotty Reed with a Black Talk Radio News Report. Check us out and other commentary online at blacktalkradionetwork.com. Peace.